Hi everyone, welcome to the virtual launch of the event of the launch of the global report, Women in the Mind of the Future. I'll start first by making some housekeeping announcements. First, language. We have interpretation for the event in 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, on the third button from the right, there is a little sign that looks like a globe. You just click on this and then you can choose your preferred language. If you don't choose any language, know that I think the flow language is English and probably a bit of a Spanish, I think. But otherwise, if you want to hear other thing than English, please choose your language. The webinar is recorded. We will be, it will be posted online afterwards in a couple of days, both on the website of the IGF and then on the YouTube channel of IASD. You will also receive an email with the links to the recording and to the PowerPoint and the report that we will be launching today. And also please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask questions to the panelists throughout the webinar. We will collect them and then share them with speakers who will answer at the end of the panel if we have time, or otherwise, if you have other issues, you can also contact us directly and we will respond after the webinar. All right, now that everybody understands me, let me introduce myself. My name is Isabelle Ramdoo. I am the Deputy Director of the Intergovernmental Forum on Mining, Minerals and Metals for Sustainable Development, the IGF. For those of you who do not know us, we are a forum of 81 countries from across the globe. We facilitate dialogues, conduct research, provide technical support and training to our members on a wide range of issues that covers the entire life cycle of mining and all sizes of mines. And our work covers issues such as legal and regulatory framework, socio-economic benefits, gender equality, financial benefits, environmental management, mine closure, post-mining transition, amongst others. It's a great pleasure for me on behalf of the IGF to say a few words to kickstart our event today. We are really thrilled to be here. This is the end of about 18 months of hard work. And we are here today to launch a flagship report called Women in the Mind of the Future, which is led on our side by our gender team, Ege and Marion on the call. The report is the first major output of a project that we have developed with partners that I'm going to mention shortly. And it's a really great pleasure for us to see so many people joining us. We are over 140 now. I think more are joining. We had over 300 subscribes. So happy to see people from diverse sectors, various backgrounds, and with a shared commitment to increase gender equality in the mining sector. As most of you have noticed, the mining sector is at the cusp of fundamental changes with rising demands for so-called critical minerals that are needed for the energy transition, advancements in disruptive technologies, and efforts made to curb carbon emissions, amongst others. These will have ripple, although varied effects on countries, and in particular on their workforce and on the talents that are needed to work in the industry in the future. While we have seen significant progress in the mining industry, thanks to the changes I've just mentioned, however, it is vital to recognize that true progress cannot be achieved without ensuring inclusivity and equal opportunities for all. And the role of women in shaping the mine of the future is a crucial aspect that requires our attention. And you will see why in a moment when my colleagues present the findings of the report. To fully appreciate the task ahead of us, we need data, good quality, reliable, and comparable data. In 2021, with the support of GIZ, at the IGF, we looked at what impacts new technologies coming in the mining sector would have on local benefits, such as employment and procurement, amongst others. While that research showed that the mining labor force would be significantly transformed in the future, notably with major changes that in the nature of occupations, with some tasks disappearing, other tasks being created, and some completely restructured, we had little data back then that could be compared across countries to understand how men and women would be impacted differently and how governments and industries could work collaboratively to prepare the workforce. What was also clear from that research is that women in particular would be most impacted, mainly because they only constitute a very small share of the mining labor force. The magnitude of change, therefore, seemed disproportionately higher for them. But the glaring lack of cross-country comparative data regarding impacts on women's occupations, their levels of education, their skills, their career path, their working conditions, etc., made it very difficult for us to understand the scale of changes and hence think about how those changes should be addressed appropriately. This comprehensive global report we unveil today seeks to bridge this gap. It is the result of extensive data collection and analysis, collaboration with many global institutions, and the tireless efforts of experts in the field that undertook detailed context-specific analysis on a sample of 12 countries that you will discover in a few minutes. I would like here to acknowledge our key partners on the project, the International Labour Organization, and Casper is going to make the concluding remark later on. The ILO has been instrumental in providing us with granular disaggregated data by sex, age, occupation, education, skills levels, etc., for a time series of over 15 years for the baseline countries that we present in the report. They made wonders in crossing industry and occupation statistics, something that I think has never been done before, at least for the mining sector. I'd also like to acknowledge the UNDP Environmental Governance Programme and the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, who funded a few studies, namely Peru, Colombia, and Mongolia, and the German cooperation program in the Andean region that is implemented by GIZ and BGR, who funded the Argentina study, and the International Women in Mining, who facilitated several dialogues around the project and worked with us to design infographics, some of which you will see in the presentation later. All our partners were instrumental in putting this report together. And of course, behind the institutions, there were incredibly dedicated men and women that I would like to especially thank, and I'm sure they will recognize themselves. So before passing on the floor to my colleagues to present the main highlights of the report, let me briefly tell you what you can expect from us next. So this project has 3 phases. The global report we present today is the main outcome of phase 1. It is a state of play report that delves deep into challenges currently faced by women in a sector traditionally perceived as a male-dominated industry. The global report sheds light on existing gender disparities with a zoom on women, notably in terms of skills gap impeding recruitment, retention, and career advancement, highlights working condition barriers and insufficient existence of inclusive policies. This report is not just a document. At this pivotal juncture, it is a catalyst for action. It is a call to reshape the mining industry's landscape, to cultivate an environment that embraces and champions gender equality, dismantle barriers, and ensure women have equal access to opportunities to jobs that at every level of responsibility. This is the only way to forge a sustainable pathway towards a more resilient and forward-thinking industry and society. We will also release the accompanying country reports. There are, I think, 10 of them that are already published on our website. Then next, the second phase that is starting now will focus on skills that are in demand for the future, given the advancements that I mentioned earlier. And under the leadership of the ILO, we will be working with Zambia on the skills anticipation plans, which will include a sectoral focus on mining. The aim is to support governments in shaping the future of work backed with detailed state of play data on the current workforce with a gender lens. We hope to be able to expand this in the future for more countries. And finally, the third phase will consider employment along the mining supply chains. We all know that mining is not a big employer, it's more capital intensive, and there are significant opportunities for women and businesses in the supply chain. And beyond this project, we hope to be able to add more countries in the future. Let me now pass on the floor to my colleagues. So next, Ege Tekinbas and Marion Provencher from our gender team will provide you with the key highlights of the global report. After that, there will be a panel discussion moderated by Fitsum Weldegiorgis, who is a senior research consultant with affiliations with the International Institute for Environment and Development in London, and an industry fellow with the Sustainable Minerals Institute at the University of Queensland, Australia. Fitsum also led 2 of our country studies, namely Australia and Ghana. Fitsum will introduce the panel after Ege's presentation, Ege's and Marion's presentation. So with this, I pass on the floor to you, Ege and Marion, for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. Good morning, good afternoon, even good evening to all participants joining in from different parts of the world. It's a pleasure to greet you today. Maybe I will reiterate Isabelle a little bit, but before starting presenting the main findings of the project, I just want to say that the reason that we started this project was to uncover what the future holds for the participation of women in the mining sector, given the main trends that are constantly changing the outlook, functioning, and the dynamics of the mining sector. And Isabelle has explained already, we identified these trends as the introduction of disruptive technologies, increased demand for minerals in the face of energy transition, and also ever increasing requirements and expectations from mining companies to mine more responsibly and more equitably. But before diving into these findings, first we want to hear from you, and we did let's say an interactive format that Marion will explain to you how to use. Marion, over to you to explain the Menti.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Hi, thank you so much, Ege, and brilliant. So yes, so we wanted to make this presentation interactive and see how well you all, the attendees, know the gender dimensions of large-scale mining. And of course, we'll give you the responses based on our cross-country analysis, which is the global report, which is we're launching. So for this next part, I'm inviting you to use your phones, your personal devices. You can follow the instruction at the head of the slides and go to menti.com and use the code 4799-2417. You can also, it's much easier, just scan the QR code here on the left-hand side of the slides, and it should bring you all to the same platform. So while you're there, just please let us know, where are you connecting from right now? Where are you from? That's going to give us an idea of all the countries that we're seeing today with us participating in this global launch. And I'm already seeing a few very interesting answers. Being Canadian myself, I'm happy to see representation from my home country. But Venezuela, Nigeria, Mexico, Mongolia, Ghana, Thailand, very interesting, Ecuador, Sweden. I'll just wait for them to keep them coming. And also let you know to please keep the Menti open on your phones or your personal devices, because we'll ask more questions as we go through the presentation, and the page on your phone will update itself once the slides arrive and we get to the questions.
And I think we owe a special thanks to our colleagues and participants joining in from Asia, because I know it's very late in your countries, and thank you very much for making it to this launch event today.
Yeah, absolutely. We have people coming in very early in the morning and people who are staying in, like our moderator Fitsum, very late at night in Australia right now.
Amazing. All this diversity. Thank you very much for joining in today.
Yes, so you will have the chance to keep joining in as we move through the slides. but I think we have now 90 people, 92 people participating. I'll move to the next slide, which is our first question for you that relates directly to the global report, which is, just give me a moment. There you go. What do you think is the average percentage of women working in mining globally? So that's an approximation. We have an answer, and the answer that we have here is based on what we know of the global report, so the analysis that we've done on this. So please let us know, is it 5%, 15%, 25%, or 35%? So what do you think is an approximation of the global average of women working in large-scale mining?
While waiting for the answers, maybe we can say a few words about why it's important to ask you what you think the answers are. Because when we started this project, when we started drafting the global report, we tested our assumptions against the data that we collected from the field. So actually, we are repeating the same exercise today with you to learn about the assumptions that you also hold based on your experience in the field.
Well, I guess the majority of the people, 45 answers out of 80, say that it's 15%. And you guessed right. So I'm gonna hand it back over to you, Ege, for this one.
Thank you, Marion. Actually, we will present you 4 main highlights from the report today. And the first main finding is that indeed, women's participation in the mining workforce is generally trending upwards, but with a slow pace. So what we see is that mining is a very important economic sector, but not necessarily a big employer. Nonetheless, it's a very, very important employer, and especially for women in mining communities. And first of all, this is because mining is associated with high wages. As we see, for example, from data in Chile, we see that mining employers are paid almost 3 times compared to other sectors. So the wages are comparably high when compared to other sectors. And also for many mining communities, mining sector is the only available employer through direct and indirect jobs. However, what we see here is that mining is one of the most masculine sectors with the lowest female participation, except for the construction sector. So it's a very alarming, but also slightly positive trend that we found. The participation of women is not high, but it's trending upwards. And if we look at the percentage of female participation per countries, we see that it usually varies between 9% to 25%, with an average of 14%. And apparently, Sweden is the winning country here with the 25%. And we see that some Latin American countries, although there are very important political developments about women's participation in the mining sector, still lagging behind below the 10% threshold. And another important finding, another important finding that we observed across countries is that women are generally concentrated in certain positions. And it's also related to the fact that there are structural problems that we observe across the country data. But yes, let's ask this question to you first, and then we'll share the answers with you.
So yes, like Ege said before, we go to the answers to what type of structural barriers and tendencies we see in the participation of women in mining. We want to ask you to please connect to the Menti. Again, you can scan the QR code, or you can connect using the logins at the heading of the page, and let us know true or false, or perhaps you don't know and then you can rank it in the middle. It's a scaling system. True or false, are women mostly employed in technical work? That's the first question for you. The second one is, women employed in mining have higher educational attainments than their male counterparts. So it is true or false. And then the third is, women with STEM degrees prefer the mining sector because of its higher salary. Again, true or false here, bouncing on some of the things that Ege said. So let us know what you think is your assumption about those three statements. So I can say that the majority of you don't seem to believe that women are mostly employed in technical work, but do seem to believe that women have higher educational attainments. And I see a split crowd when it comes to women with STEM degrees preferring the mining sector over other sectors.
It's also interesting for me to see that most of the participants think that women have higher educational attainment compared to men in the mining sector, because definitely this wasn't something that we expected before gathering the data from the field. I'm giving too many clues, I guess.
Yes, but I think 93% answered, so we can go to the findings of the report.
Okay, great. Yes, actually, one of the structural issues that we discovered across all countries was that women are generally concentrated in clerical and support positions. And as we see here, depicted from Sweden data, is more than 70% of clerical and support workers in Sweden are women. And this is the actually only occupational category that is dominated by women. And this is also true for South Africa, where all occupations are dominated by men, except for clerical and support workers, where women make up more than half of workers. And also, the findings show us that women are underrepresented in almost all other occupations, including technical occupations such as technicians, craft and related trade workers, plant and machine operators. Also, they're underrepresented in all professional, managerial, and leadership positions. So, one thing we see is that one of the striking findings that we have is that, as we have been asking to you in the Mansi, is that women actually across almost all countries, especially in developed or developing, most of the developing countries, women have higher educational attainment than men. All but 2 countries reported that a higher proportion of women joining the large-scale mining workforce have advanced levels of education compared to men. However, while women are generally more educated than men, it was also observed that they had less technical and vocational qualifications compared to men. And this is a very important barrier for the recruitment of women for core mining activities, which are more labor-intensive and generally requiring mining-specific technical skills. Also, the data confirms that women in mining communities are missing easier to enter occupations that require lower skill levels and accessible with quick skills programs, because women do not have these kind of vocational skills that could increase their chances to be recruited in the sector. Lastly, about education, we also noted that fields of education were highly gendered, with women mostly coming from non-STEM fields of education. And we also could say that this is related to the fact that women and girls are less represented in STEM and STEM-related education programs generally across the globe. But the data that we have from Canada showed us an interesting finding, which you almost corrected right, which is that even if women have STEM degrees, they do prefer other industries over the mining industry, especially, I mean, where we have data from different countries. This is something that we could observe, but of course we didn't have this data for every country, but it's also another important finding that we need to pay attention on.
Good, brilliant. Going back to the Menti, so let me just upload the QR code for those who are joining or have joined since we started. For the others, the page should have updated on your personal devices. We're asking you another true or false. So please tell us true or false. Women who work in mining tend to stay for their whole careers. So once women are recruited, once they're in the pipeline, they tend to stay in the mining sector. So is this true or false? And then the second question that we have for you is true or false? There is a significant gender pay gap in mining, meaning that on average, for equal occupations, women are paid significantly less than men. So in your opinion, is this true or false? And of course, we'll give you the answers in the next section of the presentation. So I can see based on your responses that there seems to be an intuitive agreement around those two statements, which is that women do not necessarily tend to stay for their whole careers in mining. And I see the trends going towards false. And for the other one, that there is a gender pay gap in the mining sector that is significant. So going on the side that the statement is true. So I don't know, Egi, if you want to give us the answers.
I will. I also want to say that this also confirms the need for this project, because we all have the intuition about the main trends in the mining sector, but I think the importance of the Women and the Mine of the Future project was to put the data behind these assumptions, because yes, you corrected right. Let's start with the leaky pipeline. We see that women leave the mining labor force earlier than men, which can indicate that women face structural barriers that see them leaving mining at an earlier stage in their careers compared to men, which also decreases the talent pool that is available for leadership positions. And looking at the gender breakdown of mining workforce by age and by occupation, some country baseline studies found that female workers in certain occupations drop out at a higher rate than others. We have this amazingly granular data from Australia, thanks to our moderator today, Fitsum. And we see that a closer look at the occupational breakdown according to age brackets shows us that the steepest decline observed is for women, women managers. You see that when they start up their careers, usually below the age of 30, they make up around 39% of the all managerial positions. However, as their age increases, then they just drop out. And when they come 50 years and above, women constitute only 10% of the managerial positions. Whereas when we check the administrative and clerical categories, we see that it's almost stable. It starts with 66%, and even after 60 years of age, it is at 62%. So we see that women, especially women with potential to be recruited at leadership roles, they just drop out from the sector. This is related to many structural barriers, but of course also related to the gender pay gap, which is very significant in the sector. What we saw is that in almost every country, men are paid better than women for the same quality of job. We also see that highest earning brackets were occupied by men, whereas women were generally concentrated in the lowest paying jobs. Data also showed us that the gender pay gap usually widens as women become more educated and move up in their careers. So it's an alarming trend, which also confirms the leak pipeline. So if you want women to be a part of the future of mining, there are several workplace culture challenges that need to be addressed, as we also confirmed in the project. I will not go into details of these challenges because I believe we have a very promising panel ahead, which will talk about all these challenges in more detail. But very briefly, these challenges include the lack of appropriate facilities and personal protective equipments, lack of childcare support and pregnancy accommodation, also lack of appropriate work-life balance programs, and rampant sexism, harassment, and gender-based discrimination in the sector. So let's move to our next main finding, which is global trends affecting large-scale mining require upskilling, reskilling, and new skills with a specific focus on men. What we see is that, for example, we know from the World Economic Forum report, maybe you all know about this alarming trend, that close to 20% of employment in large-scale mining could be displaced by 2025 due to the introduction of labor-saving technologies. So here the question that we need to ask is, who will lose jobs? What we see from data is that low to mid-skilled and mid to high-skilled workers, such as clerical support workers, drivers, plant and machine operators, and trade workers, face the highest risk of redundancy. And as we have just seen from the data from 12 countries, is women dominate the clerical support workers category, where there is a big risk of redundancy. And interestingly, data from Australia, Brazil, Mongolia, and South Africa suggested a gender shift in drivers and plant and machine operators category, where women are becoming more and more represented. So, for example, the data that we have from Mongolia is women's representation in machine operators occupational category increased from 6% in 2014 to 15% in 2020. So we see this increase, but the question here is that whether this shift is due to men leaving these occupations that are high risk at redundancy, or it's a genuine change in the sector. The other trend that we observe is about reskilling. So what we know is that increasing digitalization and modernization of tasks in mining will require more sophisticated and digital skills. And what we also see is that upskilling and reskilling the mining workforce is easier in higher income countries where digital skills are more prevalent. However, in lower income countries with deeper digital divide, deeper digital gender divide, and limited access to digital infrastructure, women in local communities will face the biggest challenges to access training and upskilling opportunities. Also, one other concern that we will need to address is the time availability and access to reskilling opportunities for women, as this training programs will require dedicated time for women. And I will not go into details of this data, but we see this from Australia, that women can access to these kind of on-the-job training programs, especially earlier in their careers and late in their careers, and they miss all these opportunities in the prime years of their careers. So I think it's an also important consideration that we will have to keep in mind. One other significant trend that we need to pay attention on is the potential of skills transfers from other sectors. To meet the skills demand for non-traditional mining jobs, talent from other sectors is being attracted to the mining industry globally. For example, greenfield mining operation projects will require more scientists with expertise in geology, geophysics, data processing, and environmental related fields. And what we see from our project findings is that women are more represented in such STEM categories compared to more traditionally mining-specific STEM skills. So in the long run, we can say that this could increase women's employment in the sector. And we already see this trend in action in Argentina. And I believe our participants from Argentina, Pamela, will be able to tell us more about this trend. We see in Argentina that women have a significantly higher representation in lithium exploration and production, which shares similarities with the chemical industry. And last but not least, mining operations are also assessed for their environmental impact and community relationships.
Ont un impact sur les relations.
Oh, sorry, I hear French interpretation, but it's okay. So what we could say is that there will be need for more social scientists, which could also increase women's participation in the sector. Lastly, an important red flag is out-of-country skills import. Very sophisticated technologies will require highly specialized skills, and these skills may not be present in some developing countries. In Ghana, for instance, we saw that a very small percentage of women working in the sector do have advanced or intermediate skills education, and they have less access to skills programs. Their participation is around 4%. So what we see is that skilled female workers are in Ghana are often expats. So even if the participation of women in the mining workforce increases, we also need to ask if these benefits are equally shared by local women in developing countries where these minerals are being exploited. Okay, the last important finding that I want to stress is about data. So this project was based on data, and let's see what you think about the availability and accessibility of gender disaggregated granular data. Over to you, Marion.
Yes, of course. So again, your phone should have updated, the page should have refreshed. If not, please feel free to log in, scan QR code. And we're asking you, based on your opinion, so before we tell you what the challenges we've encountered, what are, in your opinion, the biggest data challenges that we face when trying to move forward with evidence-based decision-making and policy decisions? So one is that data is not always collected and disaggregated by sex, and even less so disaggregated by gender identity. Second is that data is not centrally collected or consistently analyzed. Then we have that data, when we have data, is analyzed, but it's rarely analyzed in a gender responsive way. So we rarely take the time to break down the implications of the data for women and men separately. And then 4 is all of the above and some more data challenges that we encountered along the way. So I see that the majority of you can picture the type of challenges we've encountered while working on this baseline disaggregation for 12 countries and then this cross-country analysis. And I want to say that you are right. We did encounter a lot of challenges.
Yes, one important challenge, as actually Marion has already hinted, is that even if we can find an aggregate data on participation of women in the mining workforce, we cannot have this granularity in data that goes beyond the binary sex axis. For example, we do not see that factors or indicators such as indigeneity, race, ethnicity, disability status, age, etc., are included in data collection and segregation. But we also saw during the data collection that industry, of course, has a very big responsibility to collect, analyze, and disclose this data. But also governments can be very instrumental in not only the collection of the data, but also about how to use this data. We have seen great programs from policies from South Africa and also from Australia that shows a clear linkage between public policies or corporate policies and participation of women in the mining sector. And lastly, what I want to say is that something that was kind of surprising for us to see that companies' sustainability reports often lack important data points such as participation of women and men from different age groups, educational levels, and occupational groups in skills building activities. We believe such data is very important and can easily be disclosed by mining companies in their sustainability reports, which could help development of corporate policies that could promote women's participation in the sector. Over to you, Marion.
Yes, thank you. So the global report, for the ones who haven't had the chance to go through it ends with a series of recommendations that we built using the data and the evidence that we gathered from the pilot countries and the global analysis. And I'm happy to summarize here a few of them that we think are especially relevant when looking ahead. So kind of what to do, like Isabelle said, that call for action. How do we transform? And those recommendations try to answer the question of, based on what we know, what can we do now to build a sector that is more responsive to the needs and the realities of women. And of course, at first we have policies, and specifically corporate and public policies. So governments having, for instance, gender strategies and implementation plans along with those strategies in mining can have a lot of impact for the shape and molding the mining sector in their countries. Those strategies should have measures to promote compliance with the private sector, of course. And both public and private policies should address the most needed improvements in the work culture of the mining sector, such as the prevalence of sexual harassment and bullying, the insufficient focus on inclusive health and safety, the prevalence of the gender pay gap, the drop-off rates of women associated with limited career prospects and other work-life balance challenges. Second, we have recommendations around education and skills. So our recommendations include that we promote STEM education for women and girls, but that we look specifically at women and girls in mining communities. So stakeholders should promote technical skills programs for mining communities, understand the needs and the needs for reskilling and upskilling of those communities, and better support women's access to lifelong and on-the-job training. We also recommend, of course, investing in digital skills and digital infrastructure for mining communities. Our third set of recommendations is around data. So without data, like Ege said, we're not able to diagnose who's at greater risks of losing their livelihoods, who might benefit from certain programs, who needs support and in what area. So for instance, how many women and men, which age groups, what educational levels, what occupational groups have access to skills building activities. We need to know that if we then want to build projects and programming policies to support changes for the future. So that type of data will allow us to see the systematic inequalities and obstacles and help us come up with targeted solutions for women and men, and women from indigenous communities, women from mining communities who would otherwise be invisible. So in that regard, it's crucial that companies work on means to collect and report on that disaggregation of data with all of those indicators that Ege mentioned. Finally, we have recommendations around opportunities for the future. So I'm doing a short summary here. It's a lot more detailed in the global report, but we of course recommend more cooperation across different stakeholders, building on best practices, such as the voluntary corporate measures, strengthening women operating on the ground, such as women's organizations, and supporting their initiatives, and generally promoting best practices whenever we see them. And so after having heard those findings of our reports, this is the last question for you. So considering the current participation of women in mining, their occupations, the leaky pipeline, the gender pay gap, considering also all those changes sweeping across the mining industry, we wanted to ask you, do you think that women will benefit from the changes currently affecting the mining sector? And so the three options we have for you is, yes, automation will make mining safer and increase the demand for highly skilled staff, support the employment of women. 2 is that no, the structural inequalities will remain if they're not addressed, and they could actually get worse with new technologies and the kind of changing landscape of mining. And then the third option is a little bit of both. Could be positive, could be negative, could be an interesting mosaic of positive and negative impacts and opportunities on women. So please let us know what you think.
Oh, we have a gloomy outlook.
We have a gloomy outlook. So please feel free to tell us your answers, even as I tell you that, unfortunately for this one, we don't have the answer for you, not yet.
But we have a great panel, maybe where we will find more answers to this question, I believe.
Exactly. So what we have for you right now is this excellent panel of experts, ranging from representatives for governments, civil societies, companies, who are here with us today to tell us a little bit more about the implications of the findings of our report for their work. So now it's my pleasure to hand the floor to our esteemed collaborator, Fitsum, who will be moderating the panel discussion for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ege and Marion. That was really excellent summary of otherwise a very extensive reports. I think it included around 8 to 10 countries, each one extensive in themselves. So well done for that summary. It was really interesting. We have seen in the presentation by Ege and Marion that there has been a series of assumptions, and we have also seen trends around women's participation in mining. So some of this finding may come as a surprise to you, or some of it may just confirm what you already knew. But I think today, beyond the trends that has been uncovered by the report, the global report, we are really interested to know what this means, as Marion said, to the different stakeholder groups. And so for this reason, we have a very excellent panelists with us here, and they will help us to really explore the implications of those findings for them as different stakeholder groups, as well as the way they have successfully been able to navigate through some of the difficult challenges that women have been facing in the mining sector. So without further ado, let me just quickly introduce our panelists. Please join me in welcoming first Maya Muchlis, who is the co-founder and the executive director of Women in Mining and Energy in Indonesia. Currently, she is also, an independent director in Golden Energy Resources. She's also senior sustainability specialist at Hatch. She is also an environmental specialist at Tetra Tech and gender consultant at the World Bank. Maya's professional background as an environmental and sustainability specialist in several mining companies in Indonesia spans for 15 years. So welcome, Maya. Our second panelist is Armelle Sevi. She is the director for gender and white collar workers at Industrial All Global Union. After working in the development in humanitarian fields, Armelle Sevi joined the trade union movement, working with the International Federation of Chemical, Energy, Mine and General Workers Union, one of the founding organizations of Industry All. And the focus of Armelle's work at Industry All has been on work on gender-related issues. Our third panelist is Johanna Øygard. She worked within Sandvik for 20 years in various HR positions, where she developed a strong background in the mining and metal industry, where she developed also cultural change, organizational design, and human resources policies. She has recently changed a role to a business role as a territory manager for Northern Europe. And lastly, but not least, our final panelist is Panela Morales. She is the Undersecretary of Mining Development. She in Argentina. She holds a PhD in social sciences and philosophy. She is the former National Director of Productive Management Improvement in the former Ministry of Productive Development. She specializes in public policy and leads facilitation processes and improvements for the application of transparent, evidence-based productive policies. So welcome our panelists. Without wasting much time, let me just go straight to you, Maya. Maya, I'm hoping that you'll give us a perspective from Women in Mining Associations. You are the co-founder and the executive director of Women in Mining and Energy in Indonesia. So after having read the report and having listened to the presentation by Ege and Marion, I want to ask you, how does your experience working in the mining industry resonate with the findings? And do you perceive any change in women's representation in large-scale mining?
Yeah, thank you, Fitsum. Can you hear my voice clearly?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, Maya.
Fitsum, for introducing me at the beginning of the session, the panel discussion session. So what I can say about the report findings. So this report may reflect our work progress as part of civil society movement towards gender equality in the mining and also energy industries, and what we need to improve in the near future. So I can see clearly that our contribution as CSO is really counted here. So thank you to Marion and also Barbara for involving me in this panel discussion. And I want to tell everyone here, let's keep moving forward to continue our works to create a better place for our future generation. So this report reveals lots of interesting data that can be a solid reference for many organizations, including private sectors, governments, CSOs, of which direction we should go and how we develop our program. So back to 5 or 7 years ago, representation of women who works in mining and also energy sector in Indonesia was about 7%. But these days, the percentage is increased slightly to 10%, and this is aligned with the report findings. There's a slow increment, but yeah, it's still progressing. So pressure from the internal and also external stakeholders requires many large-scale mining companies, particularly for public companies, to improve their company performance through diversity and also inclusion. Last year, government of Indonesia signed agreement with the international partner groups to accelerate the just energy transition to achieve the net zero emission target in 2060 or sooner, and the renewable energy mix target in the just energy transition partnership of around 34% in 2030. So with this commitment, it requires most of the coal-fired power plant to be early retired, and it will directly impact to many mining companies, especially in coal business industries. So the just energy transition allows coal business in Indonesia to be more adaptive and also flexible in response to the plan. So data provided in this report definitely related to the demanding skills in the future mining regime is highly valuable insight for the company to set up business strategy and also directions toward the just energy transition. So some of the coal-based company here have divested their business asset and transformed into innovation and technology mining business. So our young talent, especially women, should be more sensitive to these changes and prepare themselves to learn new skill, reskill, and also upgrade the skill.
Thank you, Maya. I think I agree with you in a sense that, you know, with the current and future transition, energy transition, there will be different sorts of skills required. Just from a broader Women in Mining Association, if you can give me your quick view around which topics were most pertinent and actionable to you in your own context.
Yeah, thanks for the questions, Fitsum. So I can see there are 3 key points that the most pertinent and also actionable for our organization in Indonesia. Yeah. So first is level up our organization from dynamic but dispersed movement and to recognize industry leader taking seat at the table on the diversity and also inclusion agenda. The second, knowledge and also sharing best practice. So collaboration entails sharing and comparing experience from which best practices can emerge to expedite progress for organizations who successfully adapt this example to their own unique circumstances and goals. And the third is visibility. So participation in the global network like this session will allow organizations such as Women in Mining and Energy Indonesia to feature and promote their work and the amazing women who are already leading the industry in their country. So adding to the recognition of the woman contribution globally and providing inspirational role models for other women to support their commitment to the mining industries.
Great. Thank you, Maya. Let me go to Armel, who might be able to give us, to zoom us in to the workers. So giving us a perspective from the workers. Armel, as the Director of Gender and Non-Manual Worker, I think you are uniquely placed to tell us about the gender dynamics of women and the kind of challenge that they face in the changing mining sector. So from your experience, could you tell us what the skills, what are the skills that are in increasing demand, or also the skills that would be, outdated as we go into transitioning to new mining sectors mode? So if you can tell us both, and also the likely opportunities for women in the future of mining.
Sure, thank you very much. I would like also to thank the organizer to give the opportunity for Industrial to speak on this panel. So our organization is the Global Union Federation, representing trade union, national trade union federation in several sectors, mining, energy, and manufacturing. And so when it comes to mining, what we've heard from our affiliates is that it's very in line with what is in the report, and it is that the work, the skills who are more in demands are the skills in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we see that actually the administration and clerical occupation with an important concentration of women are in decline. And we had also several of our colleagues who've been women trade unionists, being truck drivers or also train drivers, and we've heard that from different work sites that these occupation now are disappearing because the trucks and are being automated. So so as you can see, it's quite in line with the conclusion that we have that has been presented earlier on in the report. So what does that say in terms of opportunities for women in the mining sector in the future? I think that as trade union, we are very worried with what was mentioned earlier, the low level of representation of women in STEM occupation, and also the leaky pipelines. We have several reports of trade unions mentioning actually the fact that women are leaving and quitting the jobs that they would actually that they like, but because of discrimination and because also of gender-based violence and harassment. So I think that for us as trade union, we strongly believe that these ongoing transformation, if there is no action taken against discrimination and gender-based violence and harassment in the workplaces, will only replicate the inequalities that are existing in these work sites. So I think that to make these jobs really more attractive for women, and trade union believe in this, there should be really strong measures that are accompanying the policies that the industries are taking to get more women on boards. We see that we also assist and see a slow increase of women in the mining. But what we see is that it is there is a lack of accompanying measures to really make sure that these places are safe places for the women, and that the women are also acceding decent job. So there should be more work done on pay transparency with more regular pay audit or gender reporting, and we should also have transparency in the recruitment processes, in the promotion processes to avoid discrimination. There was also the mention of a lack of PPEs that would not fit for women. So the companies should really develop gender responsive occupational health and safety policies, taking into account the different needs between men and women in occupational health and safety. And lastly, just to finish for the first question you asked me, I would like also to highlight and to insist on what has been said earlier by the two presenters. There should really be gender responsive skilling and reskilling programs, taking into account the specificity of the women. Women have less time, the burden of unpaid work for care responsibilities at home is taking a lot of their time. So we should take this into account. We should take also into account the digital divide, gender-based digital divide, where women have less access to these digital skills and training. And also we should take also into account the fact that many jobs that are now done by women and the skills that they would have, for example, in administration jobs, it will be very difficult to have training to adapt these women in the new technical jobs that have been taken into account. So this is also an issue that we should look into. Sorry, I was a little bit long, but it seems it was important for me.
No, that's really good, Armelle. I think from the presentation that we've heard earlier, one of the key findings was that women almost across the countries that were studied, they had quite high level of education, even in some of the STEM related education. But on the other hand, as you mentioned, there is also this pipeline, this leaky pipe issue that women face. So these are quite important challenges that need to be tackled. So from a trade union perspective, could you tell me what tools there are at their disposal, at the trade union's disposal to try and tackle these issues? And also make sure women are included in the future of the mine?
I think, first of all, I would like to say, because I didn't say earlier, I really find that the report is really excellent, and it will be for great use for trade unions, because these reports identifies the data that are necessary to actually understand the situation of women in mining, but also the data that need to be taken into account when we will analyze the different impact on of all these transformation ongoing in the mining sector on women workers and men workers. And this data is essential for trade unions in the negotiation and collective bargaining. And actually, it is currently lacking to the trade unions. There is sometimes a lack of transparency from the companies to share this data. There is no data available publicly by also, I mean, by the authorities. So I think these reports will be really used, and I'm sure I understood that there will be also national reports in the 12 targeted countries. So these reports will be really used by our affiliates in these countries. What I want also to say is that it's important. What I really like in the report, and what I think will help our unions, is to understand that granular data is important because it helps to understand the different dynamics and the different needs of the different women. So it helps to adopt an intersectional approach to address inequalities and gender-based inequalities. So the response to women working in the headquarters of the company in the city should be completely different from the response that will be brought for women in the community. So, and trade unions will be able to use these. So what are now the main tools that trade unions have actually to ensure that there will be more women in the future in mining. So the main tool that we have, the main instrument, is collective bargaining agreement. And this is really a key tool and a key instrument to make sure that there will be that gender equality will be moved forward in the mining sector, because otherwise companies may have policies, but then without a collective bargaining agreement to make sure that these policies are implemented and monitor actually also the progress of the implementation of this policy, then policies can remain dead letters. And so it's why it is very important for our affiliates to have access to this kind of data that the report is presenting, so that affiliates can really negotiate collective bargaining, knowing actually the real situation. And my conclusion on this is also to say that it will be very important for our trade union to have this data also to negotiate just transition plans, especially when there is a for example, closure of coal mines in this transition, because this also negotiation with trade unions will help not only to focus on the job lost and replacement of jobs, but also have a broader approach and really address the social impacts in the communities, not only on the direct workers, but also workers providing services to the mine. So I think for us, this report, I think, is very critical, because it will help us in really developing gender responsive approach in collective bargaining.
Great, thank you so much. I think I agree with you, and I think everybody agrees that data is quite important in order to inform policy, but also inform some of the things that you mentioned, especially the gender responsive training that's needed, and also to inform the the digital divide, the information around digital divide and women's specific need as well. So thank you very much for that intervention. So I think earlier we mentioned that this report only, I don't know whether we have mentioned it, but this report really didn't focus on supply chains or supply chain companies. But we are really honored to have Johanna Øygard from Sandvik to give us some perspective from the supply chain companies. So Johanna, from what you heard here, and as a large supplier for mining companies, are the challenges against women's participation in the workforce in mining similar in supply chains, or can we talk about different sorts of opportunities and challenges in the supply chains of to the mining sector?
Thank you for being able to participate, first of all, of course, and a really interesting report. And I recognize so much, even if it's from the supplier perspective. So it will be really interesting also to see the future phases of this, of course. But I would say that we have gone through similar changes during the years. And if I just relate to my years within Sandvik, I would say that I think it's a history within the industry that it's a unwritten truth, or was an unwritten truth, that in certain position there can't be women. And we did actually, like 15-20 years ago within Sandvik, really a deep dive into this and looked into both the physical but also the psychological work environments, because in some way, if women can't work in certain environments, men can't work there either, I would say, because then it's not really, really good for either of them. So I think that was a turnaround for us as well, to really focus on not just the safety part, but the work environment as such, and did a really, really great job there. And now, like 20 years later, I would say that 20-15 years later, we have a totally different workforce, and in some way a turnaround that have a totally different picture of men and women working together in the shop floors and so on in the industries. So that is one thing, but also something that is really, and that also Armel mentioned about the recruitment processes, because I think that we work a lot with diversity and inclusion and equity in Sandvik and have done for years, of course, but we have, of course, the KPIs, and we are really, really thorough in the recruitment processes with at least one woman in the final candidates and so on, but also thinking about the cognitive diversity perspective. That is something that we work with a lot. And my history, for example, working within R&D, we really succeeded with increasing the number of both female managers and female employees by like 30%, but then realizing that the profiles were the same. We didn't really have the cognitive perspective in this. So we had a bunch of really, really gender diversified persons, but the profiles were the same, and we didn't really have dynamic. So I think that also focusing on this kind of thing gives also the perspective that we gain by automatic the gender perspective if we more focus on the cognitive perspective as well. But it's also something working with, I think, the management in the recruitment processes, working really close with challenging the old truths, because as we know, you tend to take a safeguard and hire in somebody that you know this will come in and just plug and play. We need to challenge our managers to think 180 degrees and think that what kind of things could really develop this area. And it's not just this plug and play, it's perhaps totally different. So I think to also challenge, work with management team, managers at all levels within the diversity and inclusion, education in biases and so on, because I think that looking ourselves in the mirror, then we recognize what we do unconscious and so on as well. And I think that this has been success factors for us in also working with these kind of things within Sandvik. And also, of course, in this with role modeling, because I think that is so important. Looking at myself, I've worked within a typical HR woman position within HR, but also to be able to, in some way, transfer into business and really show that this is possible. Women can really have all kind of positions, and I think that it's so important at every level in the organization to really show that this is possible. And I think that it's our work to make this visible, and also to work with this role modeling, mentorship, and everything that can really, of course, both women and men, but really to strengthen women. And also not just focusing on newly graduated women hiring in. We need to work with women doing career shifts, working together with municipality and governments and so on local levels to be able to change and educate. Earlier on, it could be in certain welding processes or whatever it might be, but now looking into the new technologies with electrification, automation, digitalization on local levels globally, of course, but how could we raise the knowledge here and make also women to do career shifts and not just hiring in newly graduated women? I think that this is so important to work with and together locally with our governments and so on, what it might be. And this with making the shift, as we talk about in Sandvik, with this new kind of industry with electrification and the digitalization and everything. I think that this is a tremendous opportunity for us actually to also do it from a gender perspective. But it needs consciousness, and we need to work like this close with all managers to look ourselves in the mirror, challenge ourselves all the time. So I think it's a lot of things to do, but from my perspective, I think it's possible.
Great. Thank you, Johanna. I think you are right in saying that, it's one thing to increase the number of women employed, but it's another thing to also improve the profile of women in the positions that they are employed in. So I think you have mentioned some of the key success factors at Sandvik, which includes promoting their positions, their also role modeling and mentorship, knowledge related. Maybe if you can quickly elaborate on the knowledge related aspect as a success factor that has been implemented in at Sandvik.
Yeah, well, I would say that, you know, increasing competence and knowledge, I would say, I think also many things is, of course, about reflection in this, and reflection where we were and where are we right now. But I think knowledge in the aspect of competence development, on the job trainings, identify on every level, succession planning, talent reviews, and so on. We are tending to speak about that on high levels, but we really need to do it on the shop floor level, and knowledge sharing in the perspective of role modeling. We did something, success factors there could be a success factor somewhere else, but it also lessons learned, because we have, of course, taking two steps forward and one step back sometimes, but we are slowly taking slow steps forward. And I think about this with knowledge, we are continuously learning, but I think that developing women is much about the on-the-job training, define the women that we really, you know, want to raise and make it visible, and working really transparent, because I think that is something also that Amel mentioned about the transparency, and that is something, it's not just about the recruitment process and transparency in that one, it's also about how we develop and how we work with retention. We need transparency in all those kind of aspects in an employment cycle.
Thank you, Johanna. Over to you, Pamela. Sorry for keeping you waiting for a long time. And the disadvantage of being last is that we have a very short period of time before we close, but I'm sure you will help me here to provide me with the perspective from the government side. So we know that Argentina has been really proactive in tackling the representation of women in the mining sector. So you, as a government representative, could you tell us maybe quickly around the role of government in terms of supporting women's skills development and ensuring that they are not left behind in the mines of the future?
Muchas gracias. Hello.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will be speaking in English, so please click on the English channel. It didn't took much time. It was very interesting to be listening to all our colleagues, and we agree in much of what we are saying, so it was a pleasure listening to them. I'm not going to center on data from Argentina, because you have the report available. So to introduce a policy for a gender perspective means to be responsible of the inequalities existing in a sector that is mainly masculinized. So Argentina is a federal country, and the provinces are the owners of the resources. The first that we must do is understand the particularities of the different shifts that they have the industry, and how they impact in everyday life of women. Because as we have seen, women are the main in charge of care works, and these are the main barriers we find in this segment for women to join the mining industry. I think we must focalize in some axes, and I would like to be as practical as possible for the benefit of time.
What we've been doing from the mining secretary is working in 3 aspects, which were already mentioned already. One, information, data, diagnosis, building. We cannot manage if we do not have information, clear-cut information, transparent information. We cannot think of public policies if we do not have the data we need. So the first things government had to do is to create baseline diagnosis on the current state of women in the mining sector. Argentina last year has been working alongside IDV with those baseline working. We took many cases from different provinces, and we took cases from metal and non-metal companies. That's important because we have to have different realities. It's not the same to work in the metal sector rather or in the non-metal one. And in many Argentine provinces, we find lots of productions of those materials. So it's important to have those different mappings, because we cannot think of so broad policies. We have to detect which are the problems in each of these areas. The second axis is to promote training in gender and new masculinities to public institutions, organizations, the companies which are really making good progress, but we have to work together with them so as to improve gender training, gender perspective training, and unions. And finally, women and men from the communities who are working in the mining projects. It's essential to work in zero tolerance towards gender violence. That has been mentioned, and we have to work with the current situations that are being faced in the sector so as to establish improvements in the future. And finally, we have to work on the articulation and to have a cooperation with the rest of the actors, the stakeholders. The governments on our own, we cannot work alone on this topic, which is cross-cutting to the whole mining industry, but all the productive sectors are in an isolated manner. We need collaboration from the civil society, international organizations, universities, but fundamentally, we need to work with communities in the provinces, states, so as to make visible the inclusion experience, the good practices, as it was mentioned, from the private and public sector. How do we do this? Well, I think that we have to have more activities, talks in the places itself, in the sites itself. Sometimes it's difficult to go and visit the territories. So we have an open dialogue mining table for the community. Last week, we were in a town where there were 4 lithium projects. 4 lithium projects. It's a very small community. And the first thing that came up in that dialogue is that women told us, we are not given driving licenses. We want to drive the same as in the same way as men, because that would be a very good entrance door for a lithium project. This was also mentioned by Ege as well. And we have to work with the communities and in all of the levels of government, provincial, national, local levels. And we cannot produce a change in gender gaps if we do not work together with those 3 levels.
Thank you, Pamela. And finally, can I ask you to just keep it in maybe less than a minute in telling me the role of government in terms of improving the working conditions in order to make mining more attractive and more competitive in the search for new talent and increase diversity, please. Thank you.
Bien. Brevemente.
Well, briefly, I am going to take something which was mentioned on the opportunity we have on the lithium industry. I think this is a unique opportunity because lithium projects will help to include more women. They are already doing this. The lithium industry is mobilizing more female participation in the sector. What is it that we have to do as government? Well, to create incentives so that women that study careers related to STEM careers choose to work in the mining sector, and not so that they don't go to another sector. We know that this activity competes with other sectors, and it's important to create incentives. And as they mentioned, also labor conditions. It's essential to work with the unions and the human resources areas in the companies, so that the minings and the mining projects become a good place for women to work. It's also essential to provide consultancies for the interviews in the communities to generate or to create soft skills so that women can have job interviews, and to work with human resources departments of the companies, so as to end with gender discrimination, the one that we find when recruiting personnel. We know companies are working on this, but there is still discrimination. In order to sum up, I believe that governments have very difficult challenges, and one of them is to make the work of women visible in the industry, which is already happening, to show benefits, to create incentives. And for this, we need to improve the conditions of the sector so that all women can add.
Pamela, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, our 4 panelists. Sorry for the short time. I know we could talk a lot on this topic. Hopefully, we will have another opportunity, but please, everyone, join me in thanking our panelists. And now let me introduce Casper Edmonds, who we are really grateful to have here with us to deliver the closing remarks. I will shortly introduce Casper, and I will hand over for him to give us our closing remarks. So Casper is head of unit extractives, energy and manufacturing at the International Labour Organization. He has more than 23 years working for the World Bank Group and the ILO. At the ILO, he coordinates the ILO support to governments, employers, and workers in addressing labor challenges and employment opportunities in the extractives, energy, and manufacturing industry. He also coordinates the department's work on the circular economy and on business and human rights. Over to you, Casper.
Thank you very much, Fitsum. So, on behalf of the ILO, a heartfelt thank you to everyone taking part in our excellent, successful launch event today. It's, in my view, a great success because we are not only today launching our new global report, Women and the Mine of the Future, and everyone, please share this report with everyone you know in your networks. It deserves to be seen by everyone. No, today we have also shared views on the actions we can take to create a mining industry with more and better opportunities for women, men, and other gender identities. So the ILO, what I'm saying is we're extremely proud to have been a partner of this report, of this critically important initiative right from the start. This groundbreaking research that we are launching today is in the ILO a key part of our work more generally to advance gender equality and decent work in the mining industry. Our work in mining, as you might know, also includes the promotion of safety and health and other fundamental principles and rights at work. And we do this in close collaboration with our 187 member states, workers' organizations, and employers in the industry. For those of you who want to know more about what we actually do in the ILO, please do contact my colleague Camila Mireles, who is the foremost ILO expert on mining and who's with us on this webinar today. Now, what makes the report we are launching today so special is that it is based on data and statistics from both traditional and new sources. Not many people know this, but in the ILO, we have for about 100 years created the world's largest database on labor statistics. It's called ILO Stat, where we clean and compile data that comes from household surveys, from labor force surveys, from national statistical offices in 187 member states. But what is new here is that we had never really mined ILO Stat before in any detail when it comes to a better understanding women in the mining industry. And we had certainly never before triangulated ILO Stat data with ISIC data and with other data from governments and companies in 12 important mining companies at the same time. So as a result, the data that was gathered and analyzed and presented to you today is truly new. It is groundbreaking. It is allowing us to go under the surface. As far as we know, no other publication has been able to present and compare sex disaggregated labor data for the mining sector, data about employment and working conditions among different countries before. As we heard earlier, what Marion and Ege showed us, these mining trends, in some instances, confirm our assumptions. In other instances, they allow us to have a deeper understanding of what is at play. But we will, after today, all of us who advocate for better conditions for women in the mining industry, we will be able to say the data clearly shows that. And that's important in a world filled with alternative truths and slogans. Data is the new gold, they say. In the ILO, we certainly believe that the data we are presenting today is essential to generating better sex disaggregated profiles of workers in the large-scale mining sector. And importantly, it offers policymakers, decision takers in government, employers and workers' organizations. It offers other mining industry stakeholders. It offers women themselves the crucial information they need to improve working conditions, to support the growth of the industry, and generating decent jobs for more women and more men and other gender identities in a more inclusive and diverse mining sector. Looking to the future, there are, as we heard earlier, several challenges facing mining workers, several challenges and opportunities affecting the future of work in our industry. There are new technologies, digitalization, there's the increasing demands for critical minerals, the energy transition, climate change, and so on. It will be a very different industry in the future, 5, 10 years from now. The future is already here, it's already happening. We're already seeing a significant change in the landscape of mining occupations, and we are already seeing an increase in demand and global competition for workers with STEM degrees or with ICT skills, for instance. Now, this is what has prompted us to already start the second phase of our initiative. We have already begun working on a skills anticipation exercise. We want to support governments, workers, and employers in better identifying the skills that are needed now and in the future, and the strategies that are required to develop those skills so we can successfully sustain our industry in the future with more and better opportunities for all. This exercise will look at where skills are in demand now and in the future, what we are missing in the industry, where they can be found in the market, how constituents can respond to these challenges, and how workers and employers can support governments in bridging these gaps. And of course, this is, as we have been doing so far and will be doing, it will take into consideration the gender dynamics in future mining work. We are starting in Zambia this year, but hopefully, with a little bit of financing, we'll be able to complete this exercise for the other 12 countries, including in this project as well. Now, we not only want to know about skills, we also need to address what we heard panelists talk about, these underlying barriers and obstacles that are so stubbornly preventing more progress when it comes to advancing gender equality in our industry. This is about changing working cultures. This is about changing working conditions and improving them so that our industry is truly open for everyone. We want to reskill, we want to retrain, we want to upskill, we want lifelong learning, yes, but this has to go hand in hand with other considerations for how we can make sure that the mining industry becomes more diverse, more inclusive, with better opportunities for both women and men. With those words of closing, allow me once again to thank our excellent partners. Today, a special thanks to Isabelle, Ege, Marion, and the entire team at IGF for this great session and for all your work on bringing us together. And congratulations on the launch of the report today. Thank you to our excellent panelists, as you will no doubt have noticed, representing both governments, employers, and workers, our tripartite constituents in the ILO. Thank you for demonstrating so well how you are already taking action to advance gender equality in the industry. Thank you for reminding us that you are key, that you have the power in your hands to advance gender equality in our industry in the future. And a special thank you to all those of you, almost 200 at one point, who have taken part in and enriched our online event today. There is no such thing as a free webinar. In closing, I would like to ask 3 things of you. First of all, I warmly encourage you to dig into the brand new data and use it. That's why we produced it. Secondly, and in this regard, I kindly ask you to consider how you can use this data to be the change that you want to see when it comes to gender equality in the mining sector now and in the future. Finally, there is something we can all commit to right here, right now. And that is to call on our country's leaders to ratify the new ILO Violence and Harassment Convention, number 190. We can and we must all address violence and harassment against women in our industry, everywhere and anywhere we encounter it. That is a first, a crucial and tangible step to creating a more diverse, more inclusive, and truly innovative mining industry in the future. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of your day.